Hi there, and welcome to another live broadcast in the Authentic Married Woman. I'm your host, Karen Seitz, and I am a coach and a mentor for married women. So I teach married women how to regain their sense of self in their marriage because so oftentimes, as women especially, we can really lose ourselves in our marriage or in our husbands, and we begin to forget who we are and we become really unhappy on the inside. So when we can learn to regain our sense of self and get to know who we are again and find our happiness within, we can completely turn our marriages around and finally have the relationship that we dreamed of and have that close, intimate relationship with our husbands. And that's what I teach women how to do. And today I wanted to jump on and talk about a simple strategy to get your husband to change almost overnight. And so, what we're going to be talking about today is really our central message and what I teach and what I am so passionate about because it's what's worked for me in my life and in my marriage and in my relationships. And I want to share that with you so that you can see a new perspective and to see a new way and to see a way forward out of the issues that you're having in your marriage and in your life by working on yourself. And so, what we're really talking about today is that as a woman, when you put your walls up and you are with a good man, that creates a lot of problems that we experience in our marriage, like feeling like your husband is distant or closed off, disengaged, that he doesn't care, that there's no intimacy, that you feel like you're roommates. Those are often problems stemming from having our walls up. And in over 15 years of research and working with women and men in relationships at a new life center, we've discovered that when as women when we put our walls up and we're with good men, that if we can learn to take our walls down, then a good man will re-engage in the relationship and the problems can be resolved. And so that can be a tough pill to swallow sometimes because we've maybe really convinced ourselves that it's our husband that is the problem. And it doesn't mean that they don't have issues or they don't have flaws or they don't have problems of their own, but that when we can focus on ourselves and change the only person that we have any power over to change, which is ourselves, then wonderful things can happen in our marriage that we never dreamed possible because we were waiting for our husband to change, and that gives our power away, and then we don't have anywhere to move forward from because we're waiting for someone that's not us to change, which is a very frustrating place to be in. So that's what we're diving into today. And the cool thing is, I'm going to talk more about this in a moment, is that as women, when we're one willing to admit that we have our walls up and do the work using the right strategy and the right tools to learn to take our walls down, then that's where really wonderful change happens. But we have to be willing to go first. And that's what the tough pill can be, is I don't want to go first. I want my husband to go first. But when we're willing to do that for ourselves, that's where we can see some really fantastic changes. And like I said, that's what I've done in my own marriage and what I teach other women to do. And it works. So we're going to talk about why it works, and that when you're willing to do that, your husband will re-engage and step up. And that's why we have the title we have today, a simple strategy to get your husband to change almost overnight, actually starts with you. That when you are willing to change yourself, like I said, using the right strategy and the right tools, and you're married to a good man, he's going to show up in ways that you never imagined possible. And all those problems are going to start to melt away and he's going to start to re-engage. But it has to start with you. And we're going to talk about why today and what that looks like. And what inspired this video was actually a quote from one of our members in our mastermind group, Christy McElhatton, and she realized something wonderful in herself and wrote kind of wrote an article or an essay, and we took a little line from that as the quote this week in our group. And the quote is, "If you are with a good man and you are a woman with your walls up." Wait, that's not her quote. That's what I want to say later. Her quote is, "When I drop my walls, the good man in my life will become a man. And that's what we want to tease apart today. One, what does that mean? What does it mean when I drop my walls, the good man in my life will become a man? And how does that actually work? And our central message is what's going to tease us apart and break this down so you can understand what that means and see a whole new perspective. This isn't taught anywhere else. And it's really powerful and really empowering when we can understand this and find the courage within ourselves to go first and do the work to drop our walls, which feels really scary. So, where I started to go and what I thought was reading her quote is again, just want to share our central message that is, if you are with a good man and you're a woman who has your walls up, when you let your walls down, your husband will re-engage and the problems in your marriage can be resolved. And it sounds simple, but it's really hard work because we put our walls up in life because we've gone through so many experiences in life, whether that be in relationships with men or with family members or with people closest to us or losses in life, or hard times and difficult situations. What happens is we don't know how to feel through the hurt that we feel in those experiences. We don't know how to feel and let go of the heartbreak that happens in life, that's happened in relationships with men, that's happened in our own marriage. And so we begin to protect ourselves and we begin to kind of guard our heart and close ourselves off and put this barrier up around us. And so it's important to understand that we do that. As women, we put our walls up not from a bad place, not because there's something wrong with us. It's just our natural humanness to want to protect ourselves. And as women, one of the main ways we protect ourselves is we put walls up around our heart. And what that does is that it pushes the people that we care about away. It pushes our husbands away. It pushes family members away or friends or those people that we care about. And unconsciously, it causes a lot of hurt and pain and issues in those relationships that we can't even see. We often maybe aren't even aware that we have our walls up, or we're not aware of how we're pushing people away. For me in my own life, my biggest form of walls was pretending that everything was okay. So I call that, and it's just a figure of speech. I call that my happy pill. So I had my walls were my happy pill. And what that means is that I pretended everything was okay. I just thought positive thoughts. I lived by the motto fake it till you make it. So just fake being happy and you'll get there. Always had a smile on my face. Um, was just constantly convincing myself and constantly convincing others in my life that everything was okay. And that's what I call my happy pill. That was my biggest form of walls because I could pretend to everyone else that everything was okay when really on the inside everything wasn't okay. I wasn't happy in the way that I put off in my facade to the outside world. I was very confused on the inside. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to deal with the challenges in life. I didn't know how to deal with my emotions. So I just shut it down. I just stuffed it down, shut it out, pretended it wasn't there. And in my marriage, my husband could feel that, and he would, how many times, ladies, has your husband asked you, "What's is everything okay? What's going on?" And you're like, "I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm okay." We do that a lot, and really on the inside, we're not. Good. I just got a comment from someone, and I can't ever see who it is, in the format that I'm using, but someone just commented, "I did that for years." Just, "Oh, everything's okay, everything's fine," but people can feel it's not. The people closest to me could feel that everything wasn't okay with me, and my life showed it. I mean, there were a lot of areas in my life that were, um, not looking so hot, and so people knew something was up. My husband knew things were up, but I just kept pretending, kept pretending. Those were my walls. My other formal walls that, unfortunately shows up most with my husband and shows up most in my marriage is what I call the ice queen. and I just shut down and I become silent and distant. And I don't always do that in a way where I look mad and angry. I might look totally pleasant, but I am shut down and cold and distant, and my husband can feel that and it pushes him away and he becomes scared of me and doesn't want to engage. And that's starting with me because I'm so scared to drop those walls and just be myself until I learn to do that. And it is a dynamic process. I'm not perfect by any means. But I've grown a lot and come a long way in being able to let my walls down in my marriage. And all those scary things I told myself would happen if I was vulnerable and just showed up as myself and didn't protect myself. My mind told me I'd be taken advantage of, that I would just get hurt and destroyed. None of those things happen. What's actually happened is I've become a lot closer with my husband, become a lot closer with my family members and the people that I care about in my life. I feel good about myself and strong and know that I can handle what comes my way without having to put those walls up, without having to pretend, without having to become the ice queen. And it's a very empowering experience. So I want to give you just some ways that, since we're already just talking about that, some ways to know if you have your walls up. And even if this, what I'm about to share with you, even if this just happens a small fraction of the time, it's there. So you want to be honest about that and realize even if it's there just a little bit, and even if it's there only sometimes, it's there. It's happening. And so you want to take ownership of that and not just brush it aside. Oh, well, I just do that sometimes. You're probably doing it a lot more than you maybe realize. I didn't realize how much I was living in this space until I took an honest look and had someone to guide me and show me the way. I hid this from myself with my happy pill. Like, no, I don't do that. I'm so open. I don't have walls. That was the place I lived from. But here's some signs to know if your walls are up, and just listen to this and see if you can see yourself in this. So you see your husband as the source of your unhappiness, meaning that unhappiness you feel inside of you, the unhappiness in your life, you're constantly looking at if my husband would just, you know, plan dates for us, if my husband would just talk a little bit more and share what was going on, if he just stopped doing this, if he just gave me a little more attention, if he just made me feel more desirable, if I wouldn't feel so lonely and I wouldn't feel um, so lost. That's a sign of having your walls up, is focusing outside of you to want to put your experience of yourself on your husband, and making him the problem. That's actually a sign of our walls being up. And again, like I said, it doesn't mean your husband's perfect and he doesn't have flaws and issues. But again, you can't change him. And I'm going to go over our three principles in a moment too, but you can only change yourself. So that's why we want to look at these things so that we see what we have control over to change, so that we're empowered and not disempowered by thinking it's our husband that's the source of our unhappiness. So, another sign that your walls might be up is you nitpick what your husband does, either internally to yourself, I'm guilty of that, or you're more overt about it and you let him know what's up, and you nitpick him verbally and you wish that he would change. So, when you're focused on all those things and nitpicking him and wishing he would change, that's a good sign that you have your walls up with him and that unconsciously you're making him wrong. And he feels that and he picks up on that and he withdraws or he fights back. But if we can learn to work on those things within ourselves, they'll show up totally different. And like I said, a lot of times almost overnight. Another sign you might have your walls up, you never agree with him. You mostly think what you think is right. Um, and again, that might be more covert or more overt, but you never see his side of things. You only see your side. You are only focused on how you're feeling and what's going on for you, and you don't consider what he might be feeling, what he might be going through, or considering his opinions and things that are important to him. You keep that focus on yourself. And again, a lot of times these things are very unconscious. Another sign is you're an emotional roller coaster, even if it's just a small amount of time. If that's happening and some days you feel like you can't rein it in and you're all over the place, That's a good sign you have your walls up with your husband. And from that place of being an emotional roller coaster, you might expect him to understand what you're going through and make you feel better. And he can't. Um, if we don't understand what's going on with us emotionally and we can't make ourselves feel better, how in the world are our husbands supposed to do that for us? It's impossible. And I know for myself and my marriage, even when my husband does try to understand what's going on with me emotionally and try to make things better, is never what I want. I always push it away. I'm always like, no, just listen, and don't really want his help. But that's because I don't really know how to help myself and I don't understand what's going on with me. But when I can start to understand that, I can be in charge of my emotions and let my walls down, not expecting my husband to understand me or make things better. And it's so much easier. Um, the last one I have on here is you give the silent treatment. You're the ice queen. Um, and that can look a lot of different ways. It can be more outright, and you can be look visibly pissed or upset, or you might just pretend everything is okay, but you are in silent mode and distant and cold. Um, and my husband at one point was very honest and forthcoming about, how hard it was for him when I would go into that ice queen mode and be in the silent treatment. Because for me, it was very confusing because I pretended I wasn't doing that. And I was, and he could feel that. And so again, he disengaged. He was distant too. And once I started to re-engage and not do the silent treatment and not be the ice queen, he felt safe again to re-engage, and it changed everything. So it's really important to understand that when you have your walls up, and hopefully you can hear some of those signs and see yourself and just be honest with yourself that you know that about you. And I know that's really hard to do, but the benefit in being honest with yourself that you do have your walls up and being willing to look at that is then you have the opportunity to change it. If we're in denial or we don't see it or we don't want to see that we have our walls up, we can't ever change it. And then we're going to live in that place of really thinking that it's our husbands that are doing this to us or that they're the problem, and we're trapped, ladies. I can't change from that place. I completely disempower myself. And I understand how difficult our message can be. I understand how difficult it can be to hear if you're a woman with your walls up and you're with a good man, it's your walls that are causing the problems in the marriage. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's meant to be an empowering message. Because if you can work with that and you can learn to let your walls down and have your husband re-engage and be able to resolve those issues, that's a much simpler way to go about things than trying to get your husband to change, because that's impossible and really futile. But that's the cool thing. That's our message today, is if you do take your walls down and you're with a good man, he's going to change almost overnight. But it has to start with you. And that's the really hard part. And sometimes we don't even know where to start with that. So now that we've kind of set up where we're going today and talking about walls and helping you see some signs that you might have your walls up so you can be honest with yourself, I quickly just want to go over our three principles because they tie into all of this. These three principles you can't live by if you have your walls up. So the framework for our group, the framework for what I teach, the framework for my own life and my own marriage is that one, you are responsible for your happiness, that there's no one and no thing that can make you happy. Your husband can't make you happy. Your family can't make you happy. Your job, money, all those things can't make us happy. It's a fleeting experience. So we have to learn to find our happiness within. And we often say, that's a quote from a woman named Mandy Hale, happiness is an inside job. But if I've got my walls up and I'm blaming my husband or blaming other people for why I'm unhappy, then I can't access what I need to within myself. I can't access me to be responsible for my happiness and to find my happiness on the inside. It just can't be done. So the second principle is that the only person you have any control over to change is yourself. You can't change your husband. You can't change your family. You can't change your boss. You can't change your kids. The only person that you can change is yourself. And that's a really empowering thing to know and a really empowering thing to live by, because it saves you a lot of energy and a lot of time. Instead of getting caught up in what everybody else is doing or not doing and wishing they would change, you can keep the focus on yourself, knowing you only have control over you to change. But if we have our walls up, we're not changing because we're protecting ourselves. We're in lockdown mode, and we can't change from that place. The only place we can change from is the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to open our hearts and to risk getting hurt, and to risk our relationship, and in a healthy, constructive way, so that we can see what we actually have in our lives. We can see ourselves, we can access ourselves, and that changes everything. So the third principle is that what it means to be an authentic married woman, or just an authentic woman, is to have a relationship with yourself, to know who you are, to know what you like and what you don't like, and to know how to be yourself, just yourself, not the facade, not behind the walls, but to show up fully in your life, in your marriage, as you. And that starts with having a relationship with yourself, knowing how to choose yourself, and knowing who you are. And that's actually the cure for our walls, is having that relationship with ourselves. And that's what I teach women to do. And that's exactly what I've learned to do in my own life that's made such a dramatic difference. And I don't think I ever even really knew what that meant, what a relationship with myself meant. And a while back, David and I did a video on that, so I'll post that in the comments section about what it means to have a relationship with yourself, so you can watch that. Just making a note. Um, all right, so with those three principles, hopefully you can see if you've got your walls up, you can't be responsible for your happiness, you can't change yourself, and you can't have a relationship with yourself. When we've got our walls up, we can't selectively hide parts of ourselves. If I've got my walls up, I'm hiding all of myself. Even if I'm fooling myself and pretending that I'm not, that's what's happening. You can't, Peggy, one of my mentors, has said this before, and I've heard it in other places too. You can think of it in terms of like feelings. We can't selectively choose the feelings we're going to feel or not feel. Like, I can't push down the bad feelings without pushing down the good feelings. I can't selectively do that. And it's the same with having our walls up. Our walls are there to protect us. But they don't really protect us. It's an illusion. And so we end up hiding parts of ourselves. But what we have to realize is you can't selectively hide parts of yourselves. If you're hiding, you're hiding. And our walls really disconnect us from who we are. So I can't have that relationship with myself. I can't make true internal change that then shows up externally, and allows me to change my external world, like my marriage, or my job, or to go after my dreams. I can't do that with my walls up, because at a fundamental level, when I have my walls up, I'm disconnected from myself. I'm numbing things out. I'm pushing things down, and shoving things down. So I can't be connected to myself, which that's where I actually find not really protection, but the ability to show up and not be scared, to have courage and confidence in myself, to know that I can handle whatever comes my way. I can handle a fight. I can handle something hurtful being said, or something hurtful happening, because I have myself. When we have our walls up, we're so scared of that hurt. We're so scared of things going wrong, or those challenges in our life, because we don't have ourselves there to help us through it. We're burying ourselves, or putting a barrier up, and hiding behind those walls. And so it's an illusion of protection. It's not real protection at all. Um, so another important piece to know in this is that it isn't your husband who's put your walls up. A lot of times we want to think, if he didn't do this, if he didn't do that, I wouldn't put my walls up. But what we have to understand is that our walls have been accumulating brick by brick by brick our whole lives. And especially in relationships with men. That first time you got your heart broken, and you said, I'm never letting that happen again, that's when you started putting your walls up to protect yourself. And again, that's normal. That's just our humanness. It's a kind of our instinct. in defense to go to that place and start to put our walls up. So we've been doing it a long time. As I was preparing for this video and just looking back through my life, I remembered one of the first times I had my heart broken, and it was in sixth grade. And my boyfriend, I put that in quotation marks because I don't really even know what that means in the sixth grade. But my boyfriend at the time, I think we went out for like a month. And it was always funny. My dad, we called it going out. And all that meant was like you were boyfriend, girlfriend. And my dad would always tease me. He'd say, well, where are you guys going? And I was like, Dad, we're not going anywhere. We're just boyfriend, girlfriend. But my boyfriend at that time in sixth grade, he broke up with me after or on April Fool's Day, and it was after we had our first kiss, and I was his first kiss. And he broke up with me the next day, and it happened to be April Fool's Day. And he had a friend come and tell me, and I remember just being crushed, and I thought it was a joke because it was April Fool's Day. And I know that that was one of the very first times that I got my heart broken. And I can look back on that now and know, well, that was sixth grade. Like that's how we handle those things then. And we were just young kids, like no big deal. But I internalized that hurt, and I was crushed. And so then from that point on, when I kept getting my heart broken in relationships with men, I started to close off a little more and close off a little more. So it's important to know that we've been doing that a long time. So it's not our husbands that have put our walls up. That's been going on for most of our lives. And so that's why we want to put the focus on ourselves and start to do surgery, so to speak, on that hurt that we've been carrying around our whole lives, because that's really limiting us and holding us back in our lives. And that unconsciously, until we learn how to take our walls down, and learn the tools and learn the steps to be able to do that, our walls are up. A lot of times we want to say, well, I've had my walls down. I took my walls down, and my husband still, still forgot my birthday, or still did this, or whatever it was that was so hurtful. Or he's still ignoring me. He still doesn't want to be intimate with me, but I've taken my walls down. Well, a lot of times, no, we haven't. That unconsciously they're up. We think we've taken them down, but in order to really take our walls down, like I said, we've got to go in and do some surgery on that pain and that hurt that we've been carrying around in our lives. It doesn't work to just wish it away or pretend it's not there. That's what I did. That was the happy pill. It doesn't go anywhere. We've really got to go in there and let it go in order to take our walls down. And another important point I wanted to make was that we put our walls up to everyone we love. That when we get our hearts broken in life, it's not just our husbands we have our walls up. We put our walls up with our family, with our moms, with our dads, with close friends, because we're so scared of getting hurt, and we're so scared we're never going to recover from that. So I hope this is helping you see these are the things that we've really got to focus on, and put the focus on ourselves, not on our husbands, not on the external circumstances in our life. We have to put that focus on ourselves. And when we do, especially in our marriage, when we're married to good men, magical things happen, and all those problems start to melt away. And here's why. And just a couple of things. A good man, how we define a good man, is you want to think back on the man that you married. It's sometimes if you're going through a lot of problems in your marriage, or you're facing a lot, you might think, well, I'm not with a good man, because the problems have been building up over the years. And you might be at a place where you and your husband are really disconnected, or in that space of feeling like roommates. It's going to be hard to see this. So you want to think back on the man that you married, the man that you chose to marry and spend your life with. That a good man is trustworthy. A good man is hardworking and responsible. They have good intentions at heart, and they're kind, and they're loving, and they're thoughtful. And you might not be experiencing those things right now from your husband, because you have your walls up, and he's disengaged. And again, I know that can be a tough pill to swallow. And I didn't want to hear that, and I didn't want to know that. I was convinced my husband was not a good man, and it was all him. But when I started to let this in, and I started to work with it in a way that really worked, um, I was proven wrong. And now it's like I had no idea the depth and the goodness of the man that I married when I married him. As I've taken responsibility for myself and worked on letting my walls down, I see more and more and more of him every single day, and how wonderful he is. That because I was unhappy on the inside and I had all those walls up, I couldn't see any of that. All I saw were the negative things and the bad things. And I painted this picture and the story of who my husband was that wasn't even really there. So when you are with a good man and you do that work, they are naturally loving and caring and kind. They really do want to show up. They're going to show up as who they are as men. Meaning they're simple. They're not going to necessarily be men who just know your every need and just make you feel um, like the most wonderful woman in the world. They will, but they're going to do it in their own way, not the ways that we expect or that we imagine in our fantasy of what a wonderful relationship is. They're going to show up just who they are as good men. One of the ways that it just always makes me melt when I get home and this happens. So, my husband and I have opposite schedules, and he works nights and I work days. And sometimes I don't get home until it's dark outside. And he always, 9 times out of 10, leaves a light on in the living room for me. And it's so thoughtful and so kind, like just little things like that that I can actually see now and appreciate that I never could before. Those are the things that start to happen, and then bigger things too. But good men want to be loving, they want to be kind, and they want to be thoughtful, but they disengage because they become scared of us and our walls and how we can make them feel when we push them away that we don't even realize we're doing. And so when we can focus on that, his nature is to be loving and kind. It's in his nature, I promise. And so when we do that work to take responsibility for our happiness, to show up as ourselves without the walls, they show back up. And it's so much simpler. I wasted so many years and so much unhappiness on waiting for my husband to change. And that's the experience that the women that I work with, they have too. They feel like they've wasted all these years, but then they start to apply this and they start to just put the focus on themselves and stop keeping the focus on their marriage, and their husbands show back up and it's like, wow, that was so much easier than trying to get him to change, than trying to drag him to couples counseling. That good men just want us to be happy. That's all they want. And so when we can be happy, they relax, they show back up, they feel safe again. We often don't realize how much power and control we have as women in the relationship and how much that impacts a man. So when we can really understand that and begin to work with that again using the right strategy, then everything can change. And it's all those things you wanted in your marriage: intimacy, closeness, affection, feeling special. All those things can be there. But you have to be that for yourself first. And that begins by learning to take your walls down and learning to have that relationship with yourself. And that's how a simple strategy of how you can get your husband to change overnight is by changing yourself. And again, that narrow framework of the women that we work with is that you must know you have your walls up or be willing to explore that and consider that, and you must be with what we call a good man. That's how this strategy works, is in that narrow framework of being a woman with your walls up and being with a good man. um, and you will see change, like I said, almost overnight. So a couple of other things that I wanted to share with you today. I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but we always like to bust myths in these videos because we're given a lot of information from marriage experts and books that we read and counseling, that although well-meaning and can give us short-term relief, doesn't give us long-term relief. And here at New Life Center, we're about the long-term results that last, not short-term band-aids, because the band-aid gets old, the band-aid wears off, and there's all the problems. We're interested in helping women find real long-term solutions to the problems in their marriage. So the myth that we're busting today by talking about this is that traditional couples counseling says that a marriage is 50-50 and both people have to work on the marriage. And what couples counseling, while can be helpful, like I said, it can give us short-term relief for sure, but it doesn't give long-term solutions because it's based on this 50-50 model that if my husband does X, Y, and Z for me and I do X, Y, and Z for him, then we'll be happy. And what that actually reinforces is codependency, that my happiness is dependent on my husband being a certain way. So if he's not that certain way, then I can't be happy and vice versa. So we have to understand the truth is that you can only change yourself. And one way to change in your marriage and to resolve those problems is to learn to take your walls down and focus on changing the only person you've ever had any control over, which is yourself. And that's where you get the long-term results in your marriage. That's where you really see massive transformation and big changes, is when you put the focus on yourself and you put the focus on learning to let your walls down and learning to be open. So I wanted to share a little bit about why we don't want to take down our walls, what the fear is, what prevents us from really being willing to do that work and being willing to drop our walls. So see if you can hear yourself in this list. So why we, as women, why we don't want to take down our walls. Well, I don't want to be hurt. We're so scared of getting hurt. Because again, we've gone through so much hurt in our lives and we haven't learned how to work through it in a constructive way. So we often just shut down to it and protect ourselves and put those walls up. So a reason we don't want to let our walls down is we don't want to get hurt. And why? Because I want to avoid pain. As women and over the years working with women and then knowing myself very well, we are pain avoiders. We do not want to feel difficult emotions or difficult feelings. So we shut ourselves off from that. But one of the examples I use with myself, because I need these reminders too, and the things that I work on with my female clients is understanding we have a phrase that's most often heard when it comes to going to the gym or doing physical things, and it's no pain, no gain. And we're so willing to do that physically. We're so willing to go through, strenuous exercise routines and marathons and really difficult physical accomplishments. And we all know if no pain, no gain. I'm not going to get that muscle I want if I'm not willing to lift those extra 5 pounds or to do, those kettlebell exercises or whatever it is. I'm trying to think of the things that I really don't like doing physical exercise wise, or squats or lunges. We're not going to get what we want if we're not willing to go there and get uncomfortable. And that's the same thing with ourselves in personal growth and transformation and change. It's not that it has to be painful, but we have to be willing to be vulnerable and be uncomfortable to gain the freedom, to gain the marriage we want, the relationships we want, the life we want. We got to be willing to get in there and feel the things we haven't wanted to feel and to shine the light on the heartbreak and the hurt that we haven't healed. We've got to be willing to go there. Um, so another reason why we don't want to take our walls is we don't see the value in being vulnerable, and that kind of ties into the no pain, no gain. If I don't see the value in being vulnerable, I'm not going to do the work I need to do to see what I need to see, to feel what I need to feel, and get the result that I want. And Brené Brown, who's a wonderful speaker and teacher and an author, um, she talks about this, and I'll post a little clip in the comments, but she talks about vulnerability is so difficult for us because it shines light on those negative emotions we don't want to feel. Vulnerability is like the place of grief and loss and heartbreak and all those things that we associate negativity with. But vulnerability is also, as she says, the birthplace of joy and courage and love and creativity and all the wonderful things about life, too. So we have to realize there is a huge benefit in being vulnerable. And being vulnerable, that's where I get to know myself. That's where I get to be connected to me. It's where I get to see the wonderful things and beautiful things in life. And it's the same for you too. The vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. But a lot of times we don't see the benefit in being vulnerable because it does feel so scary and it does feel so uncomfortable. So another reason that we don't want to take down our walls is we're terrified we're going to be taken advantage of. And I've heard that a lot from myself and from women I've worked with, that we're so scared we'll get taken advantage of if we take our walls down. And I promise you, having the willingness and courage to go there, it's the exact opposite. When you have yourself, you get to make choices and decisions that keep you in alignment with who you are and allow you to see the good things in life and allow you to make choices so that you don't get taken advantage of. I know if I get taken advantage of, then I'm complicit in that. There's choices I was making or things that I wasn't willing to see that I allowed myself to be taken advantage of. When I have my walls down, I've got my own back. So I'm not going to get taken advantage of. Or if I do, I'm willing to look at myself and say, okay, how did I show up? What wasn't I seeing? What did I have my blinders on to that happened? And then finally, why we don't want to take our walls down is we misconceive that they are our protection. So we have a false belief that our strength comes from our walls, and it doesn't. Our walls close us off, shut us out, numb us down, and it's not real protection. It's all fear. And so one of our how we define what it is, what it's like to have our walls down, is that when we have our walls down, we're soft, which means strength without fear. So I can come from a strong place within myself without all that fear. And it's such an empowering, rewarding experience you can have of yourself to realize you don't need your walls for protection. You just need yourself. And you can't get to yourself if you've got those walls up. So let's talk a little bit about the benefit then of dropping our walls. The first is you'll see massive changes in your husband and massive changes in your marriage and in your life and in yourself. You'll get those results that you want. If you're sitting there thinking, I just want to feel close with my husband again, I just want to feel like we did when we first met and we got married. Well, when you're willing and want to do the work and are committed to yourself to take down your walls, that's exactly what you get. You can be authentic. You can really be who you really are, because when we're behind our walls, we're pretending, and we're covering ourselves up, so we can't really let who we are out. So when you take your walls down, you get to be your authentic, true self, and really know and understand what that means. You don't have to pretend anymore. You can just be and live genuinely in your life. You don't have to put up a facade that everything's okay, or you don't have to wear the facade of being miserable. You can learn to be truly happy in yourself and bring that into your life. You're going to feel good about yourself. When we've got our walls up unconsciously, we're creating a lot of negative feelings about who we are, and we don't feel good about ourselves. And then we project that onto our husbands and project that onto our lives and the people that we care about. So when you're able to drop your walls, then you begin to feel really good about yourself. And then you project that out onto your husband and that out onto your marriage and your life. You can be kind and sensitive and caring. We can't really access those when we have our walls up. We can be nice, but we're not really genuinely being kind, which it comes from the heart, and there's no agenda, there's no strings attached. It's just a natural expression of who we are. Who you can let go of worry and anxiety. When we have our walls up, we're terrified of what's going to happen. We're always thinking about what's next, what's next. When you have your walls down, like I said, you know you've got your back. You can handle what comes your way. So you don't have to spend all that energy and time worrying and being in this place of anxiety. You can be a good role model to your kids and especially to your daughters, to teach them not to be scared of life and to be open and embrace life, even the downs, even the challenges, to embrace it all with an open heart. And you can teach them that by living that by example. You can feel in charge of your life because with your walls down, you're able to make different choices and see new opportunities and new possibilities. And you know how to navigate your marriage and navigate the challenges because you have yourself. You see new possibilities and you create your dreams and you go after them because you're not scared of life and you're not scared of getting hurt because you know you can handle it and that makes life exciting and engaging again. You can have a loving, intimate relationship with your husband because you can finally let him in again. And most importantly, you can know what to do for yourself, that you become your own roadmap to your life, to your marriage, to the challenges and hardships that you face. Because again, you know who you are and you know how to show up, and you don't need to protect yourself. You don't live in fear. So you're not running around in a panic. You know what to do for yourself. You know the actions to take. Doesn't mean you're not going to feel or, have those moments of, oh my gosh, what do I do? But you're able to then say, okay, what do I need to do? And take intelligent action to take some steps to get out of the problem and really focus on the solution. We can't access that when we have our walls up because we're so busy protecting ourselves from what might happen or what we think might happen. So, in closing, just I wanted to share with you um, a example of one of my clients. She gave me permission to share this today, so thank you. But what we do when we have clients come in to work with us, and when I have clients come in to work with me, is the very first thing we do is we set up a benchmark of where they are in their lives. And what we call that is defining them as a 10 with their walls up and their unhappiness in their marriage. So one of my clients so graciously gave me permission to share her 10 from when she first came in to work with me. This was her at her, and 10 means at her worst, most challenged, most walled off, um, in what she really wanted to change. And the reason we do that is because at the end of their time working with me, they're able to look back and that's not their experience anymore. And then they're able to define their changes. So it's results oriented and it happens really quickly, and they almost forget where they were when they started. So this was, see if you can relate to this. As I read this, see if you can relate to this experience of having your walls up. Um, so I feel worthless. I don't feel like I can trust my husband. I feel inferior. I think I deserve better. I feel irrational and out of control. I isolate to try to feel safe from the pain. I am extremely judgmental. I question everything. I create the worst stories in my head that may not even be close to true. I preserve my insecurity to play the victim. I blame him for the failure of our relationship. I beat myself up. I build so many walls within myself. I get physical pain from the unhappiness of not being able to control my life. I don't know who I am anymore. And then she added a little addendum of when things get really bad and she really has her walls up. This is her internal experience. I get enraged. I slam doors. I just feel completely out of control and don't know who I am. I feel like an alienated teenager throwing a temper tantrum. At times, I feel I could rip my house apart. It's a very physical experience. And that was her being very, very honest and things she didn't want to see about herself, but that she had to get honest about in order to shine the light on it and be willing to change. And then this is her experience after of learning to take her walls down and building that relationship with herself. This is what she got on the other side of that, of willing to be vulnerable and willing to be herself. I am being honest and taking responsibility for my behavior. I am finally in control of my life. I have confidence in myself. My life feels safe now. I am taking care of myself. I am making myself available in my marriage. I want to be around my husband. I am caring for him and loving him. I am excited about the future. I feel free from drama. I am taking time for myself and listening to myself and what I need. I'm doing things I want to do and vocalizing them in a positive way. I am self aware and more in the moment. I am remaining calm. I know how to have a relationship with myself and how to be happy. And so, all those things we tell ourselves that will happen if we finally take those walls down and are vulnerable and let our husbands back in and let ourselves back in, that's not what happens. It's what I just described my client's experience. That's what we get by being vulnerable and taking our walls down. We get ourselves and we get our life back, and we do feel in charge. We don't feel in control with our walls up. We feel completely out of control because we're constantly trying to protect and constantly trying to strategize from getting hurt. So, in summary of what we're talking about today, a simple strategy to get your husband to change overnight is not what you think. It really is about looking at yourself, being honest about your walls, and seeing how unconsciously, how hurtful that is, and how much that pushes away ourselves, but also the people we care about, like our husbands. So a good man on the other side of our walls being up will withdraw and disengage and sometimes do what we call stupid and hurtful behaviors. And it doesn't make those things right or okay, but when we're willing to look at ourselves and we're willing to change and we are willing to do surgery on those hurts and pains we're carrying around and to open our hearts back up and drop our walls, a good man will re-engage in the relationship, and he will be thoughtful and kind and loving, and all those things you're craving in your marriage, they'll finally be there because you're learning to be that for yourself, and then your husband mirrors that back to you, and he's the good man that he is, and you feel good and you feel free in your life, and that's how it works, and that's what we're all about, and that's what I'm here to teach you and empower you about, are the things that you have control over to change, that can also change your marriage overnight and allow you to see and experience your husband in whole new ways. So thank you so much for sticking with me. I know I had a lot to talk about today, and I just really appreciate all of you that have been watching with me today and listening. And thank you so much for being who you are, and showing up and being so engaged in the group. It means a lot, and I'm so grateful and appreciative to be able to have this group and to share these things with all of you so that you can be empowered and you can see a new way to live. So if you're listening today and you are ready and you are committed to finally making some changes and finally dropping your walls and learning to open your heart again and be all of who you are, then I want you to go to a new LC /talk, and I want you to book a free 1 hour breakthrough call with me. And we will get on that call and I will help you get underneath all your stories and see the real reasons that you have your walls up, and how that might be holding you back in your life. And then we'll talk about where you want to be and where you want to go. And I will help you come up with a game plan and a step-by-step strategy to get there. So again, go to anewlc.com /talk, and you can book a free breakthrough call with me and get you on the path to finally taking your walls down and experiencing the change that you want in your relationship and in your life. So thank you all so much, and I will see you all very soon. Okay, bye.